The weather's breaking and we're back in the fields. What's that mean for the winter wheat? Matt Hutcheson from Seed Consultants explains.
If you grow wheat in Ohio, there's a few things we want to address that you want to be keeping your eye on in the early spring. So we'll get into those today. One important thing is assessing the wheat stand and determining if it's a viable stand or if it needs to be torn up and the field planted to another crop. So key thing there is counting the number of tillers. It's typically understood that anything below 25 tillers per square foot is going to result in a significant yield loss. So you want to make sure you count stands in several areas of the field, dig up plants, take a look at the plants and count the tillers in a square foot. It's pretty easy to do to identify tillers on a plant. Just dig out plants here, separate them. Just if you want to take a look at actual tillers, you'll have a main stem, and then this plant has several tillers coming off of it. So we got a main stem, and looks like we got 3 to 4 viable tillers. There's a pretty small one there, may or may not produce a head. But the key to tillers is that tillers, especially the tillers that develop in the fall, are essential to yield, because each of those tillers has the potential to produce a head, and the more heads you have per square foot of row, obviously is going to lead to higher yields. And that's why it's important to make sure we have our fertility in order, get a fall application of nitrogen, and maintain that fertility in the spring to produce those heads and fill out the grain. Another thing to look at this time of year is weed control, and there's a couple important factors to keep in mind there. With this wet, cold weather we're having, we want to make sure we don't get on the fields when it's too wet and cause compaction that can lead to yield loss. We also want to make sure we're applying herbicides when it's warm enough that weeds are actively growing. We can get those weeds to take up the herbicide and get an effective kill. Also, an important factor to consider is nitrogen application. This field we're standing in today has already had 11 gallon of N put on this spring, but the key is that you want to get your nitrogen on before feek stage 6, which is when the plant goes through a stem elongation and requires a large amount of nitrogen to form and keep developing. So that's an important time. When you're out here scouting, pay attention to the growth stage when you're looking at stands, and determine how soon you're going to need to get that nitrogen on to maintain your yield potential.